you gonna join me for this video? Hi everyone, my name is Laura. I am a polyglot who studies 4 languages. This is Ashitaka, my troublemaking kitty, and this is my channel Languages with Laura, where I talk about language learning tips as well as travel. In today's video, we are going to talk about learning language for travel. I always think no matter how long your trip is, there's always a little bit of language learning that you should do in preparation if you don't already speak the language of the country you're going to, or you don't know very much. Now, I'm not saying you have to become fluent in the language or anything crazy like that. Just I'm going to share some of the basic things that I like to learn before going to a new country, just to be able to get around, to feel comfortable, and to not be an annoying tourist. So first thing to know is one strategy that you can keep in mind just in the back of your head if you're going to learn some vocabulary and a language for travel is the 80-20 method. That's the idea that you can have a lot to say in a very basic way. When you become fluent in a language, you try and have multiple phrases to say the same thing or to sound more natural in that language. But if you're going just for a couple weeks or even a couple days, it might be nice to just be able to say, I have, I want, I like. And you can do a lot if you know like those 3 basic verbs pretty much. You can say a lot. You can order in a restaurant, I want, I like, or you can go to a store and you can get a surprising amount across to people with some very basic vocabulary. So that's kind of the strategy I would keep in mind when learning languages for travel. But it's not necessarily saying that you have to learn 20% of a language or 80% of a language. Obviously, the first things you learn to say in a language when you start studying a new language. For example, I'm going to Europe this summer, and while I do speak 4 languages outside of my mother tongue of English, there are still languages that I don't know that are spoken in Europe, like a lot of them, and I will be studying just some few basic phrases for this trip. And so there are certain topics and areas that I will study just to make me feel more comfortable for the trip. So one of the first things you learn when you start a new language is hi, good morning, good afternoon, how are you, my name is. And I still think that's very important to learn, to get a feel for the language and also to just have polite conversation if you are talking to like a taxi driver, or if you're greeting someone in a store or at a restaurant. It's always good to be able to say, hi, how are you? Just to be polite. And that's typically, like I said, the first thing you learn, so no worries there. But speaking of, no matter how long you're going to be in a country, you're most likely going to need to go to a restaurant or a grocery store. And so having basic vocabulary there, being able to order a meal or get some basic foods, it's probably a good thing to learn. And that, again, is something you typically learn pretty early on in language lessons. However, another point I would make of what to study: directions. I don't know why, but directions have not always been something I learned fairly early on in the language learning process, when it can be immensely useful, especially for a tourist. If you're trying to go somewhere and find somewhere and either your maps are wrong, you don't have a map, you thought you know where you're going, or you were just struggling for whatever reason, it's always good to be able to ask for directions. So where is blank? Being able to understand the response, because a lot of times, yes, being able to ask your questions is great, but what good is asking your questions if you can't understand the answer? And this can be difficult because sometimes native speakers can go on and on, or they talk very quickly. That can be a little difficult, but to be able to pick out key words: go straight, turn right, turn left, close, far, nearby. Words like this are so helpful, because if you ask a question and you don't understand the answer, then maybe you can ask another question: is it close by? Is it on the left? confirmation questions like this, where they can just say yes or no, can be so much more helpful sometimes. So while I do think it's a good idea to do your research beforehand, to know where things are that you're interested in, to be able to understand, go straight, turn right, turn left, close by, next to, it can be so helpful. Another thing I want to add with ordering food in a restaurant or going to a grocery store, if you are someone who has allergies or dietary restrictions, if you're vegetarian or vegan, I think it would be a really good idea to be able to express that in this target language so that you can ask, does this have whatever you're allergic to? Does this have meat? Does this have cheese or milk? And just whatever fits your situation, just so you don't have to do an emergency run to the hospital or not be able to eat the meal you ordered. Just to be able to avoid that from the beginning is going to be a huge relief. Along the similar lines of directions, obviously having a travel vocabulary is very good. This really can depend on what country you go to, because in Europe, we're going to be taking a lot of trains and buses. So being able to say train, train station, bus, bus station would be good. Otherwise, if you're taxi, taxi stand, or for example, when we were living in Kyrgyzstan, we learned that the marshrutka was what we wanted. They had a bus. They had a bus system in Bishkek, but that was like a big bus. They didn't run quite as frequently and they were a little more limited. So what we really wanted to be able to say is, where's the marshrutka? And even along those lines, in a marshrutka, they would take you from place to place, but when we were leaving Bishkek and getting off in Shepokov, where we lived, the marshrutka we would take would go from Bishkek to Sokolok, and it would actually pass right outside where we lived. Like literally the street that we lived on, the marshrutka drove down. And to be able to say, stop here, please. That was one of the first words we learned when living abroad, was how to say, stop here, please. And of course, because it was one of the first words we learned, we didn't quite understand the language, so we probably butchered it. But we were always understood. We always were understood that when we went up next to the driver and said, "Остановитесь здесь, пожалуйста," that we were saying, "Stop here, please." And the driver most of the time would say, "Здесь?" And we would say, "Да, здесь." They'd be like, okay, they think they're in the middle of nowhere, but reality is our school is right there. And so again, depending on the length of your stay and what kind of transportation is available there, because maybe you want to rent a car, then it would be good to know how to say car rental, car, gas station, even car wash, if that's a thing where you're going. Just be able to have those in the back of your head in case you need to pull them out, or even not even memorize them, but have them on a piece of paper that you can carry on you, so that right before you go to talk to someone, you can review, okay, this is how I say it, this is the word I'm gonna need to know, and you can go. And same, of course, with like airplane and airport. If you are taking some sort of taxi or bus or some sort of car service, it can be nice and easy to get in the car and just say airport, and most of the time they'll probably know where you need to go. But just always keep your transportation in mind. Same with a boat. We're going to be taking some boats in Greece, and so I will be looking up the word for boat in Greek. Some other key phrases that, again, are just really good to know no matter where you are and what you're doing would be, my name is, what's your name? I speak this, do you speak? I don't speak. Pretty self-explanatory. Again, something you're taught very similar at the beginning, but another thing, like, where is the bathroom? Asking where questions. Again, this goes in with the whole directions idea, but where is the bathroom? Where is the grocery store? Where is a restaurant? Like I said, with the 80-20 method, you can learn a lot of basic vocabulary just for the trip and be able to say a lot of things. But it's always good to think through however you plan your trip. And I have a video actually about planning a trip with me for this summer, but also just in general, some of my tips and tricks for planning. So you can go ahead and watch that there. And then as you go through and plan a trip, think, okay, what is some vocabulary I might need in order to get around or to feel confident in my ability to get around. Thank you all very much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe. I post, like I said, videos about language learning as well as traveling, and I will be, again, as I mentioned earlier, traveling quite a bit this summer, so I will be doing vlogs and videos about my experiences. So if that interests you at all, feel free to subscribe. I post a video every other Monday. Otherwise, comment down below some of the things you have learned on your travels. And again, it's always different for everyone in terms of how much you want to speak to people, how long you're going to be there, if you have resources there to learn the language or at home. But if you have any tricks or tips of language learning for vacation or being a tourist, go ahead and leave them down below so that other people can learn about that as well. Hope you have a great day, and until I see you again, 再见!